Hi, friends, and welcome to Life Intended, the podcast for women on a journey to take ownership of their own lives.
We're your hosts, Kelly Berry and Sadie Wackett, leaders, coaches, friends, and women on our own journeys of self-leadership.
Here, we don't believe women need to be fixed.
We believe they need to stop seeking permission and start leading lives that they choose and they design.
Life Intended is about unlearning truths that have been handed to us and start trusting your truth and living in alignment with what matters most.
Each week, we're bringing you bold, honest conversations that challenge the stories holding you back, help you uncover and step into your own voice, your own purpose, and your own power.
From inspirational guest interviews to unfiltered chats between the two of us, you'll leave every episode with insights, tools, and the kind of encouragement that sticks.
This is your space to wake up, break free, and lead the life you were always meant to live. Let's get into it.
Today's guest is Dr. Lauren Hodges. Lauren is an expert in human performance sciences, an award-winning learning designer, author, and owner of Performance on Purpose, a global training and coaching company focused on the intersections of leadership and human performance. She lives in Satellite Beach, Florida, with her husband and two teenage boys. Hi, Lauren. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here today. I love what you do at the intersection, I'll say, of like my personal and professional interests and kind of area of expertise as well. So I think it's truly such important work. So I would like if you could just start by telling us a little bit about your story. Like, how did you get here?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we do have so much in common. It is amazing all the intersections between the work that we do. But the long and the short of my career has been I've been in this industry for a while now, over 15 years, I want to say. And I started more in the fitness side, well-being side. I kind of had two roles that neither felt quite right. My formal education is in education. Actually, it's a doctorate of education in curriculum design and alternative learning methodologies. And so learning design is kind of in my academic background, and then all of my certifications and my passions and interests and all of my side jobs as I was going through the doctoral program and master's program was all in the fitness well-being space. And neither was quite fulfilling. When I finished the doctorate, I was teaching at the university level and just not in this subject at all. And I just felt like something was missing. So to fast forward quite a bit, I started to work in the corporate well-being space. I did some, just freelance work for a long time. So maybe about 10 years or so, I started to freelance and started to apply both of those areas of expertise and found that there was a nice little niche there for me. And so I started to build learning experiences for the global leaders in that space of corporate well-being and human performance. And that's where I really ran into the world of human performance sciences, which unlocked a whole lot for me. Kind of just a lot of things clicked, that the learning sciences, the cognitive sciences, performance psychology, and then the well-being world were really kind of one, and it was an emerging field at the time. And so in 2019, December 2019, I started Performance on Purpose with a friend of mine. And this has kind of evolved to where it is today. So I still freelance a little bit, but most of what we do is do training and coaching programs, and still looking at those intersections between that ability to perform at our highest potential of human performance, and then our ability to lead effectively. And to your point in the intro, which I love, self and lead others. So in our personal and like you said, I love what I do because it is in the intersection of what I'm passionate about and then what I am very lucky to earn a living doing. So it's kind of the high level arc of how my career has evolved over time.
Yeah. So for those that aren't aware, can you explain what is human performance sciences? What does that entail?
Yeah. So it has become a bit buzzy, which is a great thing. I think, the Hubermans and the Peter Attias and the Gabrielle Lyons and all the, the Whoop, devices have really kind of elevated it. But it has been kind of a blend of multiple fields for a long time, way back, in the 1980s and 90s. There was two men, Dr. Jim Lair, Dr. Jack Grapple, just as an example of two people in the industry who really they were kind of the foundation of that industry. They started to look at the intersections between things like our physical, our mental, emotional, emotional and our spiritual management of our energy and our well-being, and how they all intersected to elevate performance in the sport of life and in the sport of business. So they were testing this out on athletes at the time, kind of borrowing from that performance field, and then really starting to see tremendous results. So I would say that they arguably are kind of the founders of the field. But to define the field, it is kind of a myriad of different research areas like sleep sciences and nutrition and exercise and movement. The idea of what is known as logotherapy or purpose, having clarity and alignment in that area, private voice, inner voice, storytelling. So the mindset part of the world. So the Carol Dwecks of the world, the growth mindset space, and then cognitive sciences, focus and attention, and then emotional well-being. So it's the intersection of all of those areas. So it's almost like I kind of identify personally as a bit of a generalist in those areas. I wouldn't say I'm deeply an expert in any of those fields, but generally we're looking at the intersection of all those fields and how it relates to performance. And when I say performance, it's not just do you win games or lose, do you make a lot of money or not? It's like how we show up as our best in the different areas of life that we consider priorities for us. So I hope I don't know if
Mhm.
that would be what everyone would define human performance as, but to me, that is the definition of that body of research.
Yeah, it seems so crazy to me that it took until like the 80s and 90s for the realization that the things that you just mentioned, that you just ran through, impact how we show up. It's almost like what were they thinking about before then?
And we have a long way to go too. I mean,
Mhm,
it is continuously surprises me how many, many organizations and leaders still have not made this connection
mhm,
and continue to operate the way they do, especially some industries where you'd be really surprised because you know that their performance is negatively impacted by the norms or the systems that are embedded in that. I'm just thinking of, banking, Wall Street
mhm,
investments, those like just nonstop, high stress, high demand environments where there's very little sleep and very little time for recovery and what that's possibly doing to their performance. And anyway, it's amazing to me how far we have to go in this
mhm.
space as well.
Yeah, yeah, and long-term health effects and all of that. I think you posted on LinkedIn not too long ago about sleep and the impact of sleep on performance, and, I think we all know sleep is important, but I do think that there's a huge disconnect in, like, especially corporate and or bigger businesses and how that affects well, I guess we'll call it the bottom line, but how it affects like decision making, mistakes, you had a lot of stats in there, but it's kind of crazy just when you think about it, what poor sleep over time, over like a big population in your company can do.
Yeah, it really is. And actually, the person that I consider the authority in this space, her name's Dr. Els Vanderhorn, and she is the one who I kind of get a lot of my great statistics on sleep and the impact, to your point, on business performance and bottom line. And it is incredible. And that's just one area
Yeah.
of our performance that we could look at and say, wow, this has an immediate impact for better for worse on how we show up. I know for myself, I'm just an absolute wreck on a poor night's sleep the next day, decision making and focus and really commitment to the mission of the business. I'm much further away from it and more disengaged. And that's just one area, and
Hmm.
you think about nutrition and you think about
Hmm.
movement and exercise and not just those areas but even like management of devices and how we manage our calendars. What are those operational norms that we have either as business owners or in bigger organizations that are kind of driving these behaviors that we know don't work, but yet we still haven't looked at
Yeah.
it on that larger
Yeah.
scale level.
Yeah. To your point on sleep and being a wreck. So I have a toddler. We are 1 month into a toddler bed transition. I have not it is not going all that well. We'll just say that. But I'm a month in of I haven't had a full night or a solid night of sleep. And so that is affecting the ability to like go to the gym, to get to the gym, to work out. It's affecting my mood, my irritability, and I have feel like I have less time to do the things that I need to be doing, so then I feel behind. It's just like this kind of yeah, it's a domino effect, and when I'm lucky that I'm not, like, showing up at a job that's not really, like, giving me any space for that. I'm in total control of my schedule, and I still feel that way. So, I can only imagine if you're, like, showing up to corporate America and you're trying to act like you don't have a family or you don't have kids or, everything is good, how just, like, mentally exhausting that would be.
And so when you just made me think of something, which maybe we're putting the cart before the horse on the conversation. But to get to like some action on what to do there, when I only coach a few people at this point, and but the team coaches, we've coached hundreds of people, and one of the things that is a lot. It's not surprising, but it's maybe frustrating is the word. Is maybe sometimes we know this, and then we don't take certain actions to design days that are better suited or more aligned to this kind of these high performance, let's call them like habits and behaviors. There's nothing you could do about a toddler that doesn't want to sleep. So it's almost like
Mhm,
a wave you have to ride for a little while. It's a
mhm.
season. But the example I'm thinking of in my head is this was 2021, I think. I read a great book called Free Time by Jenny Blake. I think I was sharing that book with you maybe in a previous conversation. But anyway, she just made me start thinking about the systems that I have in place as an organization, as a team. There's a lot of
Mhm.
us parts, a lot of calls, meetings, and we're global, and so there's Asia Pacific to worry about and time zone shifts. And I realized that I was being very reactive in how I was managing my calendar, just sort of plopping things wherever it was more convenient for others, and that was preventing me from getting a good night's sleep or exercising and really eroding my mood more than anything. And so I started to take better control over the calendar. And that helped me design a little bit better of a system. I know not everyone has the luxury of
Yeah,
autonomy, but those conversations, even with your team, could be massively important. Even small shifts like let's take this 30-minute meeting and let's turn it into a 20-minute meeting and be really focused instead of having 100, you know, chats and windows open, and get to the meeting so that I have 10 minutes to breathe and get up and move and have a healthy snack or whatever. And those small changes yield really big results. So even on a, I don't know,
yeah.
knowing and doing level, there was a small change that made a huge downstream impact for me.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, I do wanna talk about all kinds of things like that because I have lots of questions, but I guess I would like to ask more about, like, in the human performance and the work that you all do with your training, what are a lot of when a company comes to you and says, "We wanna work with you, these are the problems that we're seeing," or, like, what are they noticing? What are they wanting to solve? What do those symptoms look like?
Different companies come for different reasons. Sometimes it is for some sort of performance concern. Somebody's not maybe meeting their KPIs or delivering on, maybe a sales goal. And so they come to us looking for a unique take on that. And they know that we sort of operate in a leadership development and executive coaching space that has that foundation of human performance sciences. And they're like already champions. They see the relationship. And so that would be one reason. So it's traditional performance issues or traditional leadership development. Hey, we want them to be high performing leaders. We like this spin, so we're going to take this on. A lot of the time, they come to us because, you know, the reality is right now, most American workers, anyway, I could speak for them, are overworked, under resourced, understaffed, and they're experiencing a situation where the demands that they face are exceeding their capacity to manage it. And so they're in that disengagement or burnout mode. And then the leaders are looking for solutions, whether it's in training or coaching, to not just train their leaders, but to scale that. So, we have different services that could do both. But I would say most of the time they're coming for us for one of those reasons, or they're just, like I said, generally interested in developing leaders. And this is just one area that they feel is important, kind of in a whole human approach to leadership development.
Okay. And so when I guess to speak to some of those specific problems, like if it's a performance problem, or I'm thinking more of the like, we have a problem we want to fix rather than, we'd like to basically invest in our team. Um, what is your approach for like diagnosing or figuring out like how do we figure out, is this like a human performance issue, or is this a like training issue? Is this a just not right fit? Like, what does that look like?
Well, that's a bit of a can of worms question, and the reason
Okay.
I say that is and I have a friend, I know you know her name, Jen Fisher, the former chief wellbeing officer of Deloitte, and her position on this is it's almost always a systems issue. People come to you for an individual or team consideration, "Hey, we're not performing like we should," or whatever it is, but the reality is they sort of have to face the truth of this is a bit of a broader conversation, so we take a bit of a holistic approach where we do a needs analysis and we have individualized performance assessments and things like that to help. I mean, you always want to take care of the leader. To me, it's the yes and of it. Let's get them right because we do have more control than we think in this area and the system may be whacked and it might be a terrible culture, but at the end of the day, you have to protect yourself, your energy, your well-being. So we take care of the leader in that sense, but we do a kind of a needs analysis and we're pretty honest up front, about um, this is not just going to be an examination of an individual or an intact team. It's
Mhm.
going to ask them the elephant in the room question about what are the systems and processes that are truly barriers to effectively allow individuals to invest in their whole. And that question is uncomfortable, but most leaders that come to us are already kind of champions. And so they're willing to do the work. It gets a little tougher when the organization is very big and we're working with one intact team.
Mhm.
So we can't change a 500,000 person organization. I have yet to meet someone who's been able to move that needle, but we're still working within that system to at least improve the quality of life for everyone at work and at home, you know, working on kind of it's almost like we're widening the aperture and narrowing it on the system and on the individual the whole time. And so I don't know if that answers your question, but that's sort of what
Yeah.
we evaluate progress as it comes. The harder needle to move, of course, is the system. Those norms are just fixed and there's just a deep belief that this is just the way we do things and how could we change it. But a lot of companies are really willing to make those changes and also the leaders that are really invested in themselves personally over time they're training rising leaders to feel the same way and kind of pushing the narrative and the norm. And so
Mhm.
over time, the culture starts to evolve into that kind of direction.
Yeah. So to speak to the women, the work around women, do you notice like more of these symptoms of poor management of the human performance things? Do you notice that more in the women that you all work with than the men? Do you notice they have more challenges, or what does that dynamic look like?
I mean, I've tried to be careful not to have a bias here. I prefer working with women leaders specifically because of the data that suggests that they are statistically more likely to leave the workplace,
Mhm.
statistically more likely to turn down senior leadership positions, more likely to have experienced or experience at some point burnout. So yeah, we definitely see. I will say also I mean, I'm mostly speaking to our culture here in the States. So
Mhm.
traditionally women are the caregivers at home, the keeper of all the things and all the information in the house and that's how our role is. We have two teenagers and I work from home. So naturally with the more flexible schedule, I sort of just manage everything. And that cognitive load can become really significant for most women that we work with. And of course, there's the systemic kind of inequities with women in the workplace too. So, yeah, kind of piling all of those sort of demands and stressors. Yeah, for sure. The women that we work with tend to be the ones who are at a higher, I would say, risk of performance issues, burnout, leaving, having challenges, et cetera. But also, on a more positive note, the more open and willing to see that broader picture and kind of make change. I wouldn't say that the men we work with don't. I mean, that's certainly not what I'm trying to imply. Just,
Mhm.
you know, for the most part, they seem to be a little bit easier to coach. Although my male coaches might beg to differ because they do such a good job with our male leaders, and then some of my female coaches who train male leaders like might disagree with me there. I have a little bit of a confirmation bias because I mostly work with women senior leadership.
Mhm. Yeah. I would say what I've seen is in line with what you're saying. There's just a little bit more openness, and maybe it is because, there's there's more on the line. It's either you can you can figure it out so you can keep doing what you're doing, or you cannot figure it out and have to do something else. And so maybe men aren't really faced with that necessarily. So there could
Could be.
just be a little bit more motivation to get in there and do the work. But, I think overall, especially where we are, and this is probably like a big tangent, women are more open to the work. They are more willing to be vulnerable and open to the change that needs to happen. And I think that is because it's for a lot of reasons, but I don't think men are supported in the same way. They have the same challenges, or I'll say different challenges. And I think that we'll probably see a shift, like where men are going to need a lot more support, and they're kind of dumped on all the time now. And yeah, I think we'll start to see a shift, especially as the next generation kind of comes through, who've been parented a little bit different, who maybe have had, hopefully, like primary needs met a little bit differently. They may act and perform different. I guess TBD on that, but
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we've worked with some wonderful male leaders who,
mhm,
see that whole picture. I think to your point, even this next generation, male and female, it's just going to be it's going to be a different workforce. The pendulum tends to swing pretty extreme in one direction or another. And yeah, I do feel like we're going to hopefully kind of come to a place where high performance always matters and bottom line always matters. Expectations should not be lowered, I guess, is my about people working hard and facing all the very high demands and high degree of stress that they face, and have a little bit, in my opinion, have a little bit more say and authority on how they structure their day to get things done. I mean, my husband, for example, he's in a leadership position in a hospital, and his team is great. I mean, his boss, but also the team that he leads, there's a lot of autonomy and a lot of support for a lot of people with young families, for example. They still perform at a really high potential, arguably based on the data, at a higher potential than maybe being forced into kind of a box of what their traditional work should look like. So I do think we're kind of moving in that direction. Some industries a little slower than others,
mhm.
maybe sit a little set in their ways, but I'm excited to see where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not an or, it's an and. You can't take care of your people and take care of performance at the same time, like business performance. So,
Yeah.
yeah, um, yeah. So I guess what are some more of like the symptoms if we're talking about what do say our listeners are leaders and incorporate, or maybe even like self-employed, and they're thinking about like what are the things that I'm feeling or that are kind of surfacing in my life, and how can I tie those to some of these human performance categories that you talked about so that I can begin to make some progress there?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest question I would ask as an individual is, or two questions really. What is the most important thing to me? People, thing, whatever it is. Like, what is like kind of that ultimate purpose? And are my day to day decisions, actions, habits, behaviors in alignment with that or not? If not, which, we can all say at some point or another we felt that way, maybe even on a day-to-day basis, where am I feeling out of alignment? So, you could go down the list of body, mind, spirit, physically, am I out of alignment somewhere? Well, yeah, I say that I want to live a long life and I want to be there for my children, and I want to be active up until, whatever. But maybe in this area, I'm not quite investing. And then the second thing they can ask is, like what's getting in the way? What's kind of the story you're telling there? And I don't mean that to mean to be harsh. It's not that there's not truth in that, perspective or story, but what traditionally am I going to say? Well, I don't have enough time, or my schedule's busier, and I'm in this season or that season. And then what are the real barriers? And then what are the ones that maybe, could be something I have a little more control over than I thought? Those are the questions I would ask. As to, in terms of symptoms, it's hard maybe to describe. I don't know, but that feeling, and I know we've all felt it, is that feeling of just being out of alignment in one area. I remember when my kids were your age, I was just all over the place. I wasn't thinking critically, and I wasn't. I was in my doctoral program actually when they were yours' age, and I was an absolute mess, and I wasn't performing at the level that I expected of myself. And I had one professor, such a godsend, and she was also in the same phase of life as me in terms of parenting. And she said, don't forget, the brain science here, like there is cognitive fog that's associated with raising toddlers, and there is a lack of sleep. And she kind of like poked that human performance science right back in my face as I was
Mhm.
learning. And I say that to say, I noticed it, but it was a real barrier. It was an actual season, but there were things that I could have been doing a better job of. I mean, I could have taken a little bit more breaks than I typically would have, given myself a little more grace in that category, or, little tweaks here and there to at least kind of move the needle a percent or two in the direction of feeling more rested and awake. And ask for more help. That was a big one for me, get a little bit more help. Don't set up a pack of play in the library, go ask your mother-in-law
Yeah.
for help. And then she was so amazing to do that. I know that's a little bit of a tangent, but the symptoms would be feeling out of alignment, feeling burned out, maybe feeling consistently burned out. Because I do think that day to day, hour to hour, we can feel a wide range of emotions and experiences, and our energy can fluctuate significantly. But what are you consistently feeling over time? And that's where I think journaling and maybe talking to someone, or even just taking notes on your phone, can help you go, you know what? I have been trending in this direction. My energy is lower. I do feel less and less engaged at work or whatever with XYZ. And I've noticed this. And then, yeah, then it's maybe time to start paying attention and taking some action.
One of the big things that I heard you say there that I think is really important for people to think about are, like, facts versus stories. The facts are the facts, and that's, like, real information that you can do things with. The stories are not. Sometimes they do tell you things that are helpful, but a lot of times those are the things that we're telling ourselves to keep us stuck. And in your example, like, to ask for help. You may be telling yourself a story like, no one wants to help me, or I need to be able to do this on my own, or, a thousand things that you could be telling yourself. But, those are stories, they're not facts. And if you start to pay attention to your thoughts and your, I'll say, excuses or your reasons or all of the things, the narrative in your head, I think it's very enlightening, the things that you actually think that are facts versus the things that you think that are not facts. And that goes from everything from the way other people are interacting with you, the way, whether it's email, whether it's colleagues, whether it's your spouse, it's all of the things. It takes so much mental energy. And if we can, like, kind of weed through that and start thinking in facts or, like, inarguable truths, then it frees up a lot of bandwidth, and then you don't have to worry about, that's at least some bandwidth that you get back from all the stories that you're not, like, letting guide you.
Yeah. And I'm a huge proponent of data,
Mhm.
not numerical necessarily, just data information, and you just can't argue with it. I have a good friend, Bill, who says you can't argue with your own data, and I love that. I mean, that's why I wear two wearable devices. I do like data quantitatively too, but it's important, you're tracking through your private thoughts in a journal, or you're talking to a therapist, or you're talking to the VIPs in your life, which I would caution, like, have a few of those if possible, someone who's going to be objective, because some of, your best friend or whatever is just going to be your champion no matter what, and confirm your stories all the time.
Mhm.
And then you
Mhm.
have some that are kind of like overly critical. And then you have those ones who are more objective, like a therapist might approach things. Having those VIPs, and you start collecting that data, and it's really interesting. I will never forget when I used to have this powerful story that I'm a business owner. I can't take off. I mean, I get what I put in, and you don't understand. I used to tell my husband, you don't understand, my kids, you don't understand. And I had no real boundaries with the business. And I was saying it was because I was a startup. I'm a startup. So, and there's truth in that. You have to hustle when your company is younger and growing. Revenue is king. So have to get, but I'll never forget, I was at my son's soccer practice, and what I would do is I would go to work, and he would come home, and I would take him to soccer, and what would I do? Get right back on the laptop, and I would work through practice. And I remember one time there was some scrimmage, and he came back in the car. He was so excited. He had had this great goal and I missed it. And he was so upset with me. He said, "Why are you always working? You're always working." And I fired back to like a 10-year-old. "You don't understand. I own my own business. I'm not like daddy. I don't get to clock out." And I just heard it. I was so convicted. I was so embarrassed. And I was like, you know what? This is ridiculous. I'm missing these moments. Not that and so get back to the pendulum swing, not that I never looked away from a soccer practice again. They can get,
Mhm.
right, repetitive. But I started to create more boundaries and tightness around, I'm going to go walk during practice and maybe I'll
Mhm.
listen to a podcast. And that way I can kind of keep an eye on the field, but I'm also still kind of investing in the other areas of work that aren't me staring at a screen. And everything changed after that for me. That one story actually led to what I was telling you about before, examining my calendar and all that. But gosh, your mindset is such a powerful driver of your behaviors. I feel like we get so addicted to the stories that we tell that it's really hard to get
Mhm.
away from them unless, again, we have data to prove us otherwise. So thank God
Yeah.
for a year old for me, kind of calling me out
Mhm.
better than any therapist ever did or
Yeah.
any friend.
Yeah. And I think, when you think about, we're always in motion, right? We're always in seasons of change, and you have to be willing to look around and assess, like, I don't have to make this decision forever, but this might be the best decision for me for now, for where I am in life. And, if you have to, like, walk at soccer practice because you need time to like move your body and you want to be present, you know, you won't have to do that forever, but maybe that's what you have to do in the moment because you do have two kids and they have two different schedules and you're trying to manage everything. I have made decisions like that. Just to go back to like your calendar for work, I've made decisions where, it's like, okay, I'm not doing any meetings anymore on Mondays. I was noticing I wasn't prepared. I was forgetting things, I wasn't showing up well, time was being wasted, so I just stopped, and it's like, no more meetings on Mondays. I may go back to that at some point, but I don't have to have them right now, and it's actually, like, wasting more time than it's benefiting, and so I'm making that decision, and, I don't really have any meetings before 10 a.m., and there's a lot of things that I do and I'm able to do, but it helps me, like, I'm able to be present all morning with my daughter after she gets up before she goes to school. I'm not like trying to rush her out the door and go sit at my computer, just things like that. But remembering, and a lot of it's reminding myself, like, my life isn't going to be this chaotic forever. I am in a season. I do have to kind of just like get through it. But I think that that's a really valuable thing to think about, especially, women our age who have children of all different ages and now are becoming caretakers for their parents. There's a lot of things to balance, and so if you think that this is gonna be the situation you're in forever, sometimes that can be really hard to, like, face or be able to, like, have the gumption to, like, get through. But if you think of things, "Okay, it's a season, like, I just gotta do this one change for a little while, and then I'll reevaluate."
Yeah. Yeah. And I was thinking earlier, business performance, you had said about business performance, just giving an example of the power of this mindset part and also these small changes. I mean, because we're talking about, personal examples of boundaries and whatnot, but it has real impact and kind of downstream return on investment to think about these things from a business perspective too. There's a CHRO that she leads a massive company. This is like a $2 billion company. So, safe to say, the demand on her extremely high. Her work ethic is really, really very traditionally just I'm going to charge nonstop, nights, weekends. When we first started, one of the things though that was something we worked on was she had a monthly stand up privately with the CEO, and they would go through things. Sometimes it would be every other week, and she never felt quite confident or prepared. He was sort of like a quick talker, kind of charge back, asked a lot of questions, not a great listener, this particular person. One of the things that she made a decision on, well, first thing we did was get some data, on what's going through your head, how are you showing up? Because what she was feeling, the performance issue was she wasn't able to clarify or ask for what she needed. She had a lot of strong data to present, but she just kind of would fumble her words, and then imposter syndrome would sink in. And then all of a sudden, those meetings, it just felt like they sort of just went downhill from there. So long story short, two things we worked on. Number one was sort of journaling after the meetings, taking 15 minutes of what happened, how did you feel like you showed up, where did you think you were off course a little bit. And then I also asked her to examine her work schedule and have a time block before that meeting, either the day before or the day of a couple of hours to really go through that data so that it felt a little bit more natural, and she was better prepared. And just those two small tweaks really helped improve her confidence when she showed up, because she would recognize that kind of imposter syndrome come in. What were the physical sensations that would come over her? We put in a strategy around physically, like taking a couple deep breaths, nothing that was elaborate, but just
Mhm.
little things to kind of not hack her biology. I don't love that term, but you know what I mean? Just kind of like influence her biology so that physically she was calmer and yada, yada, yada. But I mean, it had a real impact
Mhm.
on her performance in those moments, which then at the end of the year in her performance review, her CEO tells her, wow, I've really noticed you've come a long way in your ability to speak and whatever. So she had some real barriers. He was kind of a talker over type, but he even recognized the growth in her kind of owning her space, being more clear in her messaging and communication, and feeling more confident overall. So, I mean, this stuff has a real impact
Yeah.
on every area of our life when we really like make these small tweaks in the right direction, just
Yeah.
dial up or down in one area and see the results of it. So I wanted to share that because sometimes, for me, I think a lot about my personal life, how it relates to professional, but this has real impact on our professional lives too.
Yeah. I love that story because I think that it's really easy when you're in a situation like that where maybe you have a boss that is a very different communicator to get into like victim mode. Like, I can't he won't listen. No matter what I do, like, I can't get my point across or whatever. But it sounds like, she was really willing to put the work in to figure out, okay, how can I communicate this better to this kind of communicator so that I'm the one who's, like, moving the relationship and the business forward. And I just think, personally and professionally, that's really commendable because I think it's easy to just write somebody off or be like, he's a jerk or he's too busy or whatever. But
Yeah, she could have made that decision,
yeah,
never made any changes. She actually took all that training into a new role, and the new organization, I mean, she's a different leader. She showed up
yeah,
in her interview. She showed up differently in her first couple meetings with the board. I mean, it is a huge, it's nice to reflect back on the growth that
mhm,
she's made. And you're right. It could have been easy for her to fall into that trap of, oh, it's just, we don't clash, or we clash. We don't,
yeah,
he talks over me. It's him, it's him, it's him. And it is, yes, and
right.
there was stuff that she could have kind of worked on, to interact with that type of communicator.
Yeah, and the other part of it that I wanna talk about for just a minute, you've mentioned a few times, like, the schedule changes and time blocking. When we had our coaching organization and we, coached fitness business owners for a long time, internally, our culture was our meetings are 50 minutes. You always have 10 minutes between meetings, and it's the facilitator's responsibility to end the meeting on time because everybody needs that space between meetings. Now I see people going back to back to back all day. They don't even have time to get up and go to the bathroom, and I mean, that just seems absurd to me. But we had a limit for coaches. You can only have this number of coaching sessions in a day, only have this number of coaching, like, when you're doing annual coaching sessions or quarterly. There were rules around all of that because you can't keep piling on and keep performing well.
Right.
We also had, a weekly coaches meeting and our weekly leadership team meeting, and the expectation was that you had the hour before both of those blocked off so that you can prepare. And then we had kind of like this, we called it our weekly operating routine, but at the beginning of and end of each week, there was specific time set for reflection. And I think, like, those things seem kind of small and, 10 minutes between meetings doesn't seem like a long time, but if you have no minutes between meetings, it seems like a long time. And if you're not taking any time during your week to have some built-in reflection, then it's like sleep, you're not ever able to absorb all of the things that you've just been through, that you've learned, that you've accomplished. And so you can't internalize any of that to then carry forward. And I think that just keeps a lot of people really stuck and really, like, in the hamster wheel.
Yeah. And it is hard to initiate those conversations
Mhm,
with a member, a manager, a boss. But, one of the ways to do that is just, you know, curiosity and, hey, I heard this podcast or I read this research.
mhm,
I'd love to talk about, is there a better way for us to do this? And, come with your own metrics. I've noticed I'm less focused, or my team's making XYZ more errors on their invoices, whatever it is that you could present and have that conversation and be courageous enough to have that initial, hey, I think there's a better way for us to do this. Can we think outside the box on how we manage our day? But calendar management is probably one of the hidden super weapons for this
mhm.
because we interact with other humans on a day-to-day basis. We don't operate in a silo. So for me to protect my calendar is great, but I had to communicate that with the team too and set expectations, and some people they would push a little like, oh, I'm sorry, that's not gonna work for me. How about, 8 a.m. No, 8 a.m. is not gonna like it's not gonna
Uh-huh,
work. I'm gonna be at the gym and not being afraid to say that. Um,
mhm.
I get that not everyone has that privilege, but we have been able to kind of successfully nudge our clients in that direction too, to the best of our abilities. Asia Pacific region makes it a little harder. They're 12 hours ahead or behind. So I have those kind of protected outlier days as well. And I try to make sure that again, going back to like the cumulative effect, we're only doing one or two of those a month at most. And
Mhm.
at a time that is convenient for both of us. So that'd be the only time there's an exception. Now, some people who work in global organizations, this becomes a real issue. Their work schedules are horrible. So hopefully they're building in time for more recovery during the day, and examples like that.
Yeah,
Taking large chunks of time and going to the gym and getting their workout or taking a long lunch or, whatever it is during their lunch breaks, for example, if they do have early and late meetings because they're interacting with people on other sides of the world.
mhm. Yeah, that's tough. Yeah, well, this has all been great. Is there anything else? I know so you have a book. I mentioned at the beginning that you're an author, and you have, like, a stress quiz on your website. So talk a little bit about, like, where you're going with that and what you're doing. Tell us, like, the name of your book. I know it's on Amazon. I'll include it in the show notes, but talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So one of my kind of passion areas within human performance is stress sciences. And I was very lucky 2016, 17-ish to be, I said I was in consulting. I was freelancing on a project with Thrive Global and they were partnered with Stanford Medicine and Accenture. And to make a long story short, there was some really great research coming out of Stanford at the time on the brains of patients with mental illness. And there was some really, really cool stuff coming out of that. We created a digital program called Thriving Mind that was launched March 2020, actually, in Accenture. And it went on to become the most popular course in their company history. I mean, it was so needed at the time. So the timing was a lot of that success. But I fell really deeply in love with a particular area of stress around neurosciences of stress in the brain and how we all show up very differently when it comes to our thoughts, our behaviors, and our emotion under stress. So we call them our stress personalities. And so the book is almost like a choose your own adventure where you kind of learn a little bit about the basics of stress sciences, how the stress personality kind of forms, and then it goes into sort of like the different 8 different stress personalities and the reader, I'm hoping, is just sort of flipping to the ones that they feel are most aligned to them. The quiz is embedded in the book, but it's also on our website. And it's, to me, a really great way to build awareness of how you show up under stress, those predominant patterns. And I go into a lot about storytelling, mindset, all of the things we've been talking about today are
Mhm,
fused into that book as well. But that's the crux of it. It's called Less Stress, More Calm. Discover your unique stress personality and make it your superpower.
Yeah. So do you now run programs on based on that methodology as well?
We do, yeah. Our agility program is on that topic and on just sort of resilience in general. We call it agility because we don't just want to bounce back, which is kind of the definition of resilience. We want to learn how to thrive through. And so part of that program experience is getting to know how you show up under stress. So yeah, it's definitely a part of the program. This is just a very extended version of that live in-person program.
Yeah. Yeah, I mentioned to you before we got started, I took the quiz yesterday. I was a little surprised my stress personality is a worrier. I'm a little surprised by that, but some of what I read in the report, I will say was spot on. So, yeah.
Maybe there are a couple different ones, and that's the elements of one. I'm a runner. I avoid, procrastinate, push off for sure. And then I'm a worrier, I think, and a negative self talker. Like, definitely that will creep in
Yeah.
kind of like as a runner up to the avoiding stuff for me.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know, maybe take it another day and you could say
Yeah.
something different.
Yeah, definitely, and I'll include the link to that as well because I love quizzes, I love assessments, I will take all of them because I think they're insightful, and the more that you learn and become aware, or even just if it's something to think about, you don't have to, like, live by it, but if it helps
Yeah.
anyway, I think.
It's definitely not the intention of it is here is you, picture of you forever. This is always how you show up. We show up in so many different ways under stress. But based on this, the brain science, which I'll let them read about, one or two usually is our default, where we go first and most
Mhm,
often. And that's where I'm trying to get readers to move toward is where do I go first and most often? Does that change with the environment or context, the intensity of stress? And so that's kind of the hope is that they're using it as a learning tool, not like a, this is who I am forever and always.
mhm,
I mean, I think that's my kind of beef with like disc profiles and things are wonderful. They provide a lot of awareness, but we kind of get fixed into, well, this is just who I am. And I think we're always, you said it earlier, emotion and changing and evolving. So hopefully they use the quiz in that regard. It's a
yeah,
really fun quiz.
yeah. It's not your identity, right? It's
No,
just yeah,
exactly.
yeah. I know, I feel like DISC in particular because, people are like, "I am a"
Yeah,
D.
right.
I am a D. I am. But yeah. Yeah. So anything else that, we haven't touched on today that you think is important that you all is a big part of your work or just kind of like a message to women who may be looking for ways to impact their like mental, physical, overall human performance?
Yeah, I mean, I think start small is an important message. Don't boil the ocean on your first day of really thinking about this stuff. Just one small shift in one direction can really have a significant impact on us. I mean, um, I started with soccer practice, and that turned into literally evolved into how I run and operate our business, and that's huge. So start small, collect data, be curious about yourself. Turn kind of that mirror toward yourself here and there and just ask how you're feeling. So that curiosity around how you're showing up. I think keeping a note section or journal handy and just sort of writing in a little bit, it doesn't seem fruitful in the moment, but over time you go back and read and you go, wow, there really are some patterns here. I've noticed that when this happens, this is how I show up and these are the thoughts that I have. And that insight is gold. So
Mm,
that would be another suggestion is just get curious about these topics and invest in yourself, even if it's just fiercely protecting, like you said, 15 minutes or whatever for reflection time at the end of a week. That 15 minutes could be priceless for you. So see where that takes you. Hopefully, takes you further and further in the direction of alignment between who you want to be, the best version of yourself more of the time, and
mhm.
where you are now, whatever that
Yeah.
looks
Yeah. Don't boil the ocean. That's a good one.
like. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that phrase.
Yeah. Yeah, I've actually heard it maybe I'd never heard it before, and then in the past month, I've probably heard 3 or 4 people say it, and I'm like, "Maybe that's a message to
Yeah.
me." Maybe I have heard it before that, but I haven't been listening to it. So,
Yeah. You could pay
yeah,
attention to that.
yeah,
I write it down in
definitely.
your journal.
Yeah. So tell everyone where can they find you? Where can they follow you? And for anyone in a corporation who may be looking to work with an organization like yours, what does that look like too?
Yeah, so they can find us on our website, performance-on-purpose.com. That's the name of the company, Performance on Purpose. I'm on LinkedIn. Dr. Lauren Hodges, I think, is the handle on there, and have a LinkedIn learning course on the stress personality stuff if they have a free subscription, or they can just message me. I can send them one. And then I think, like you said, books on Amazon, so they can check that out if they're really interested in that angle. But just reach out with any questions. I truly love talking about this stuff. I really do. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thanks for being here. We didn't even talk about all of your learning design and all of that part of it. You just have so much going on. It's hard to fit in a
Another
podcast conversation. Thank you so much. This has been great. And again, all of those links that she's mentioned are in the show notes. So if you have a few minutes, I would encourage you to take the stress quiz. I think it's insightful. And like she said, her LinkedIn course, just lots of resources that you can take advantage of and learn from. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Thanks for listening to Life Intended.
If something from this episode landed with you, stirred something up, or gave you a new perspective, share it, tag us, leave a review. That's how this work reaches more women who really need it.
Life Intended is more than just a podcast. It's a movement back to self-trust, personal power, and living with intention.
We're just getting started.
So keep showing up, keep tuning in. If you're ready for more support on your path, head to lifeintended.co. We've got tools, community, and programs to meet you where you are. Until next time.